Hey, I'm Dan Harris. I am a fidgety, skeptical newsman who had a panic attack live on Good Morning America.
To prescribe statins slowly for cancer production.
That led me to something I always thought was ridiculous, meditation. I wrote a book about it, launched an app, and now I'm starting this podcast to try to figure out if there's anything beyond 10%. Basically, here's what I'm obsessed with. Can you be an ambitious person who is nonetheless striving for enlightenment, whatever that means? Let's start the show. I've never met George Mumford until today. Very happy to meet you, but I've been following his work for a long time, and he is an impressive dude. He has taught mindfulness and meditation to some of the greatest athletes of all time, people with names like Jordan, Shaq, Kobe. In partnership with the legendary coach Phil Jackson, George taught meditation to the Bulls and the Lakers in their prime. He's now working with the New York Knicks. A little bit of a trickier story there. We'll get into that. His backstory about how he came to the practice is quite moving, which we will talk about in full. And I should also say, by way of introduction, George has written a book called The Mindful Athlete. Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to finally meet you.
Same here.
I've been following you for a long time. So let me ask you the question that I ask everybody to start with, which
Right.
is, how did you get into this thing? How did you get into meditation?
I got into meditation because I was experiencing a lot of chronic pain when I got into recovery.
Chronic physical pain?
Physical pain, migraine headaches specifically, and lower back pain. I've had back issues I've been going to chiropractic since 1975. So I had a lot of back pain and migraine headaches, and once I stopped using drugs and alcohol, it was there. And I had to figure out a way of dealing with it without the use of narcotics or I would use some medication if I had to, but I wanted to learn how to manage the pain. And so I was in a HMO, and they had this new program. It was cutting edge when they were getting into the mind-body process. And Joan Borisenko, who at the time was one of 3 psychoneuroimmunologists, had this program called stress management. And the whole basis of the program is educating people around the mind-body process, and also introducing modalities like stress reduction, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, but mainly just reading and educating ourselves about how the mind-body process works, like the autonomic nervous system, how that works. And the idea that some of these parts of our experience, like heart rate and all of those, and respiratory rate and stuff like that, which were considered involuntary, could be controlled by just doing things. So involuntary aspects of our nervous system and brain can be controlled by doing something as simple as being still and just watching your breath or focusing on one thing at a time. So it's an indirect way of controlling these processes that we thought for a long time were uncontrollable.
Let me just back up for a second. The pain was the result of what? Was it an athletic injury or just?
Yeah, well, I think, yes, athletic injury, but migraine is stress-related.
Right. What were you? Were you in a stressful job?
No, I think it was, I think, interestingly enough, I've always been under some kind of influence, and I think the stress was just life, dealing with life on life's terms, but also probably being in a job where it wasn't really me, really not knowing who I was, kind of being a pseudo-self, doing what I was supposed to be doing, working in a certain place. And when I got clean, I felt like I woke up, and all of a sudden I realized I've been living in fantasy most of my life.
What kind of work were you doing?
I was a financial analyst working for defense industry. And, I was really good at it, but it wasn't who I was.
And how bad did the self-medication become?
Oh, I was addicted to heroin and alcohol for a lot of years.
You were addicted to heroin and yet fully functioning?
Yeah, I was what they call a functional addict, alcoholic.
Not only just an alcoholic, but also a heroin addict.
Yeah,
So that's pretty hardcore. Hardcore in that it's a very serious pair of addictions, but also to be functioning as a financial analyst.
Yeah, well, I could be, let's just say I was barely functioning at that point because it breaks down. So you start losing things. and but I was, I was very functional. I knew that I wanted to work, and I don't know how I did it. It's amazing how I did it, but I did it. I was working and still active, and then once I got clean, then I could start to turn my life around and to do things. But I was fortunate. I was one of these, because I guess there's some advantages to being a perfectionist, and that's one of them. I'm a recovering perfectionist now, but back then it was, I don't know how I did it, but I did it.
Did what? Get clean?
Well, now I get clean, but I was active and working, keeping a job.
See. How and why did you get clean?
Well, what happens eventually is you get really, really, you reach a bottom. I call it the elevator strategy. Some people, you can get off on the fourth floor, the fifth floor. Some people have to go all the way down to the sub-basement. And I saw that I was going, as I reflect on it, because I haven't talked about it, I'll be clean, and I've been clean for 31 and a half years.
Congratulations. That is no small achievement.
Yeah, thank you. So I had to reflect back on what it was like, but mostly I hit a spiritual bottom. I just wasn't happy, and you get to a point where you can't get high and you can't not get high. So that's what we call bottom. And so on April Fool's Day, 1984, a friend of mine came by who I used to get high with, and he was clean. He took me to a meeting, and that totally changed everything. I realized, I don't have to do this. And so then that's what happened. But I was really sick. I actually was walking around with a strep infection for about, I don't know how many days, but I had 103-degree temperature and went to the hospital, and they took care of the infection I had. But it really started hitting me that, I'm going to die if I keep doing this. And so I got to a point where I saw there was a way out, and then that motivated me. Then I started going to those meetings, even though I was continuing to drink and get high a little bit. But at some point, I couldn't do it anymore. It was like, okay, so I went into a detox for 21 days, and when I came out, the George that went in was no longer the George I was. I had to come out a different George. I knew that if the same George that went in came out, then things wouldn't change. But I changed and saw my street for the first time. Said, wow. So I was really seeing clearly after, the treatment and realizing that it's possible for me to have a full life without the use of drugs and alcohol, which that never occurred to me before.
And people may surmise this from your accent, but this was all playing out in the Boston area.
In the Boston area, yes, Boston, yes, this is accurate, yes.
But in defense of Boston, that is my hometown.
Yes.
You actually live in Newton, Massachusetts, which is where I grew up. You live less than a mile away from my parents' house.
Right.
So back to your story of after you got clean, you ended up in this program where you were introduced to meditation.
I was introduced to meditation, and it was interesting because after the first time we tried it, I'm looking around saying, I don't understand what happened. I don't get what people were talking about. But me being a perfectionist, I kept at it, and I read every book she had on the syllabus, and that's how I started getting. And then I'd read a book, and then look at the back of the book, and it would say other books, suggested readings, and I would read those, and I just read as much as I could about the mind-body process, but also I was very interested in nonverbal communication. How do I know? Sometimes I would say one thing and do something else. I really wanted to start to understand what motivates us and how we express ourselves. How do I know? And I did therapy. I became a therapist for a little bit. And how do I know when I'm working with somebody, especially recovering people, they're really good at telling you what you want to hear, but then their behavior is totally different. So I got very interested in knowing, how do I know which way do I go? Do I go with the verbs or the voice or the words, or do I go with the behavior? And I learned how to say to watch what they do and not listen too much to what they say. Because me being who I was able to live a double life and say things but do other things. So even though I ended up teaching other people, it was more about me understanding who I was and why I did things, and how I got clean and said, okay, so how do other people get motivated? What motivates people to do something that they've been trying to do for a long time and aren't able to do, to at some point get to a point where they can do it. And so I became very interested in learning about people, because the more I learned about people, the more I learned about myself.
So was your interest in meditation primarily a motivation to help other people get clean, or was it because you saw something in the course of personally meditating that struck you as intriguing?
Yes, it was. Initially, it was for me to deal with the pain, but then it went way beyond that. And I realized that I feel, it's being connected to something greater than yourself, being able to know the truth and let the truth set you free, that it was the ultimate stress reducer. It's really understanding how this mind-body process works and how the universe works. And if there are natural laws, then it makes sense if I live in accord with those natural laws, I'm going to be happy and I'm going to live life more fully. And so it felt good, basically.
Okay, you said several things in there that I want to dive in on. I don't want to forget any of them, so I'm just doing an inventory in my head. But let me start with, how did meditation help you with pain, physical pain?
Yes. Well, how did it help me with pain? Because one of the things that would happen is, I'll say the way it helped me with the migraine was I got to the point where I can observe the migraine coming on. And when it gets to a certain point, I don't care what kind of medication they gave me or whatever, I was hurting for certain. But I started to see how it arose, then I could nip it in the bud. I could say, okay, usually when I have migraine headache, I'm trying too hard and I'm doing too many things. So I would just go lay down and just breathe, and then I would visualize my whole body breathing. And what happens with a migraine is you get you're not getting enough oxygen, and the muscles spasm and they press against the nerves. So I started understanding that, and I could nip it in the bud, and if I could catch it before it got to a full-blown, I could actually manage it. So it was just this awareness and seeing, okay, I'm trying too hard, back off. Stop, calm down, you're doing too many things, just create some space, time out, put it aside, and then go breathe and relax, go lay down and just chill. And by doing that, I realized that most of the time I could actually, it was telling me something. So I started to realize that the body tells me things. If I can just be still and know, or be still and listen, and really listen to the body. And that's what I got into. And it not only did it get me beyond the pain, but I started noticing that I was getting clarity about certain things. Like, okay, I have pain, and then when someone asked me how am I doing, I said I was in pain all day. Well, I wasn't in pain all day. It was a little bit of pain, but that's all I remembered. And I focused on that, and that's what I got. But if I realize, okay, I have pain, but it actually moves around, it might go up, and then it'll go down, and it might go up. But if I just watch it, creating space, and just observe it as sensations arising and passing away, that I wasn't identified with it, and I wasn't trying to push it away subtly or identifying with it. So I started to see that I could observe it without being identified with it.
I'm just going to drill down a little bit, because I think a lot of our listeners may not have ever meditated. So,
right.
So if you're sitting in well, you can meditate anywhere,
that's right.
in any way, but
right.
Just say you're sitting in formal meditation, your eyes are closed, you're noticing the pain.
Right.
And this pain that you tell a whole story around, which is, I've got this migraine, migraines
right.
are never going to go away. What's the matter with me that I've got this migraine? All this terrible stuff always happens to me.
Right.
This migraine is so solid and is
right.
my pain and it belongs to me. But instead, with meditation, you're allowed to, you kind of step out of the traffic,
yes.
and you view it as, oh, this is this changing set of sensations that sometimes fade, sometimes get worse. If
right.
if I don't try to control them, they don't control me.
Yes, it's what Viktor Frankl talked about, between stimulus and response. There is a space where we have the power to choose and to transform. So what I'm creating is a space between stimulus and response. So instead of stimulus response being together, by being able to step back in a relaxed, alert receptivity. I can just observe things so that I create space. And in that space, I can choose how I'm going to react, which is knee jerk, which means no intention other than a reactivity. Mindlessly. Or I can choose my response saying, okay, given this, what's the best way to respond to this? And then even in that responding, if I don't get it right, I still can learn from that. But there's a space where I'm actually pausing and thinking about what am I going to do, and is it skillful or is it unskillful? Is it helpful or is it not helpful? Is it taking me where I want to go or is it not taking me where I want to go? And there's a lot of power in this ability. In my book, I referred to it as the eye of the hurricane. In the eye of the hurricane, there's just blue sky and it's quiet and still. And even though there's this turmoil and all of the whirlwinds and all the chaos around it, we have that inside of us, that still small voice. They talk about, Joseph Campbell in Power of Myth talked about the quiet place, that when an athlete acts out of that quiet place, or a dancer, that is a totally different experience than not acting out of that space and being hung up and dealing with stress and anxiety and all of those other emotions, fear mostly, because you are identified with what's happening instead of realizing that what happens to you is not you. Whatever you observe is not you. It's just what you're observing. But we identify. We got like sticky mind. We just, okay, this bottle is me.
Or this pain is me.
This pain is me. And even calling it pain is a problem because there's a natural reaction to that.
It's
so
judgmental.
It's judgmental. So if you can just see the sensation and identify what it feels like. Is it pulling, twisting, or that sort of thing? So you start to use language in a way where it's allowing it to be there without all of these preconceived associative thinking and abstract thinking that's involved with the word usage, like pain. Just seeing the pain. And I did an experiment when I went to the dentist. And
don't tell me you said no Novocaine.
No, I didn't say no Novocaine.
Okay.
But when I was getting a filling, when I heard the sound of the drill, there's a whole memory that goes with that, and I'm crunching up and doing all this, even though that's not what's happening now. So mindfulness creates space where you say, okay, that was then, this is now. Can you just be present to what is? And I noticed it was just a little pressure, but at the whole time my body was reacting, but by me just continuing to breathe and not get into the story about it, I started to see, oh, okay, it's not, even though sometimes they hit the nerve and you jump, every time you hear the sound, that doesn't mean that you're going to have the nerve pain with it. But that's how chronic pain gets established, is because we're relying on memory more than we're relying on what's actually happening now. And the brain doesn't know the difference between what we think about and what we experience. So
we're rerunning these old tapes.
So the memory of it is what's really present, not the actual activity that's happening in the moment.
So you mentioned your book, as I said before, it's called The Mindful Athlete, and I want to talk about your work with athletes.
Right.
But I have not forgotten that you said a bunch of stuff earlier that I wanted to drill down on. And one of the things you said was something about, and I don't know if I'm going to get this exactly correct, but something about starting to meditate puts you in touch with the laws of the universe.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, this is what Einstein said is the most significant question we have to ask and answer is whether the universe is friendly or unfriendly. And so for me and my upbringing and everything, the universe was unfriendly. And when it's unfriendly, you are going to use all of your resources to either destroy, remove, or deny experience. But when you see the universe as friendly, then you will use all your resources to align yourself with the way things are, with the laws of the universe, like this gravity. It's not personal. It's just a law. And if you live according to gravity, you're probably going to be okay. And it's a law about what you think you become. So if you're alphalizing, then that's going to be your experience.
Alphalizing?
Awfulizing.
Or
so everything is catastrophizing.
Yes.
So if you focus on, and we don't just think about something that happens, we think about it, and then there's a image with it, and then there's a story going on, that what we call inner talk or self-talk that's going on, and it's a scenario being thought out. This is what we do. But we can do the same thing with something positive. We can experience ourselves as being open and being loving, and we can play that scenario out. Yeah, that's something that occurs to me that's possible. So unless you have trust in the universe, trust in yourself, trust in the system, then you're always going to be looking for why it's not going to work.
What about your upbringing taught you that the universe was an unfriendly place?
Well, growing up in an alcoholic household, my father was the alcoholic. Growing up being black in Boston,
Yes,
puts
yes.
it puts a lot of pressure.
And
When
you
see
must have been around during the busing crisis.
I was before the busing, but yes, but I've been around where if I saw a police officer, and I got friends and family members of police officers back in that day, when you saw them, they weren't there to really serve you. They were there to control you. And so it was a different relationship with police. Not all, but some of them, because I had a neighbor that was a police officer. He was cool, but usually being black, they wouldn't hesitate to shoot at you or do a lot of the stuff that's not allowed now. So because it was that's
Although
just the
it's
way it
still
was.
happening.
It's still happening, right. So just the household and, the fighting and all the stuff that goes on living in the inner city and seeing all the poverty and the hostility or the violence, you'd be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, or somebody's going to come by. And so I just had a lot of experiences where it wasn't a friendly universe for me. And I think other people, all you need is one experience at a certain age or with a certain intensity by a certain authority figure that imprints that on your memory. So I got to the point where I was to be seen, not heard, because if I spoke up, I got beat down. That's the kind of universe I lived in.
I think you drew the logical conclusions given the circumstances presented to you.
Right.
And I think it's incredible that after growing up in that atmosphere, dealing with the addictions that you had, that you are sitting here now with me, having achieved the level of success you've achieved and having achieved the amount of inner stability you must have achieved given your status in the meditation world. I think that is incredible. I really do.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because, I just see it as just, this other thing that I like to talk about is I have this philosophy that we all, let me put it to you this way. Michelangelo was asked back in the day, how does he create these masterpieces out of these blocks of marble? Mm-hmm. And he said, all I do is chip away to get to the masterpiece that's already there. Mm-hmm. That's what I feel. I have a masterpiece, and I've been chipping away at it through this process, and it's reflecting itself. It's expressing itself, and we all have that masterpiece. And depending on where you go, I grew up Baptist, so be still and know is kind of the mantra that I learned when I was growing up. I didn't understand it, but now I understand it. Is when you can go inside and when you can turn within, and you start to listen to that still small voice, which is like our consciousness that knows there's a masterpiece there. When we access it, it's really powerful. We can see it at the eye of the hurricane. If we know that that's there, how do we access it? Well, we access it by being in the moment, by allowing things to speak to us rather than interpret them all the time. That's how we create space. It's by saying, well, what is this? And to have some curiosity, some interest to see, oh, what is this? Oh, this is interesting. It changes it. So if I turn my pain or the sensations of pain into interest, well, what is this? This is telling me something. There's something for me to get here. That totally changed my relationship to it.
In order to do that, you need to learn to develop the lens of mindfulness. You need to train the mind to see what is happening right now. To be in the moment
and to see what's happening and open it. So what am I asking? What did I ask myself to do? To be willing to see or to hear or feel or experience the present moment as it unfolds, not knowing what it's going to be. So I'm asking to embrace the unknown without knowing. Each moment is different. Each moment is changing all the time. So can I be present for it and see it? And when I can be still and know, when I can be the eye of the hurricane, I'm more able to create space to just see what's happening, even if it's unpleasant. Or, I have some memories about how awful it could be. If I can just see it and arise, the seeing, the being present to it, just transforms And then I see, oh, it's just this. Because once you understand something, it's not a mystery. Although there are some mysteries, we can say, okay, it's a mystery. It's okay for it to be a mystery because it's beyond description. We can't write about it. We can point at it, but we really can't express it. It's like learning how to ride a bike. It's implicit learning. You can't explain it, but you can do it.
When you first started walking into locker rooms with guys like Michael Jordan and talking about this stuff, how did that go down?
Went down well because I talk about being in the zone or being in flow. They all know that. They don't understand it, but they know what it's like when, if you're a basketball player, the hoop is large and you just know what's happening before and you're a step faster and you got this flow and rhythm and you can do, it's sweet. It's like things are just flowing. It's almost like if you're driving down 7th Avenue and there's all these traffic lights and you're driving and you get a green light all the way through. It's like, oh, this is sweet. It's just happening. But you happen to be in the moment and flowing with it because you're accepting things as they are. And simultaneously, you're just rolling with it. It's like being in a current. You're just going with the current till you get to where you want to go and you ease off. It's effortless. You're allowing things to happen. But the challenge is if you try to get in flow, you won't get there.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you, because how do you get into flow? I mean, I've been...
By trying not to get in flow. By just being present. And there's some laws to that. And the laws are that you have to be challenged a little bit beyond your comfort level. So you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So as you push yourself, your challenges are high, skills are high. That's when you get in a high state of arousal, which can be perceived by the novice as, I made the wrong choice, or this is too much. And so you lower your challenges or you withdraw your energy rather than saying, oh, I'm in high state of arousal, that if I just can have this relaxed receptivity and stay present to it, then I'll be in flow. See, because we spend most of our time between anxiety and boredom. Anxiety is when the challenges are high and skills are low. Boredom is when the skills are high and the challenges are low. So we control that. We can say, okay, if I'm not out of my comfort zone, I'm not growing. And how do I do that? And can you do it in a skillful way where you're pushing a little bit where it's, and this is consistent with the brain science. If you think about, there's a program called Brain Fitness, and they talk about four tips for optimum brain growth or neuroplasticity. First one is you have to have an oxygen level that's high enough because that's how it generates the new cells. Second thing, it has to be done in increments. So easy does it. Third thing is it's got to be doable but hard to do. It means you got to be out of your comfort zone. And the fourth thing is if you bring interest, if you're interested in it, then you actually stimulate the motivational circuits in your brain.
But if the key to being in flow or in the zone is not trying, how do you teach elite athletes to get into the zone by not trying? What do you actually do? Mindfulness,
the process of the power of mindfulness, as I talk about in my book, is a way of making yourself flow ready.
Flow ready.
Flow ready. So it's not about, and you don't know when it's going to happen. That's what makes it exciting on some level. You don't know, but if you
create the conditions.
Create conditions and being mindful, and it's not just mindfulness in sport, it's the continuity of mindfulness throughout. So we have to expand that. So it's really more about, from moment to moment, can I be present and be aware of what's going on? And in that awareness, there's also this knowing or this intelligence that tells us, okay, what were we looking for? And when we see it, what are we getting? So that there's like awareness and knowing together, or what we would call mindfulness and wisdom. And wisdom could be information. It could be intelligence, wise reflecting on, okay, so 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, I know that. Then there's the third one, which is what you really want to get is with all of these practices, you want to have the experience of what the teaching is or what the law is. So that's what we call intuition or direct experience. So that's what we're trying to do. So all of these teachings, whatever I say, is not to believe it, it's to see if it's true in your own experience. And then when you see it's true, then that becomes a direct experience. It becomes that's the highest form of wisdom is knowing, because you see it and you know what it means.
Before we go further on the topic of you teaching athletes, just fill in a little bit of the chronology here. So you learned to meditate as a way, after you got clean, as a way to handle your physical pain.
Right.
And then how far did you go with that? You became you were a therapist for a while, but then you became a meditation teacher.
Yes. Well, after I left my job as a financial analyst, I was living in a meditation center, and for 2 years.
You lived in a meditation center?
Yeah. I lived in a meditation
Which
center.
one?
Cambridge Meditation Center.
Yeah, CIMC. Yeah,
CIMC.
You lived there?
Lived there for 6 years. But
studying or
studying, going to teachings, having interviews with teachers and everything. I'm recovering perfectionist. I don't do anything halfway.
So you became a Buddhist?
No,
But this is a Buddhist meditation center.
Yeah, but the Buddha never used the word Buddhist.
Well,
Where
that's
does
true.
that come from? So
That is true.
It's not about being a Buddhist or being in recovery. I mean, the first thing I had to learn when I was in recovery was to identify with being in recovery was problematic. So I'm not a recovering addict or alcoholic. I'm just a person that doesn't drink and doesn't use alcohol. Now, some people think that was scary, but whatever you identify with, that becomes your limitation. So to me, it's more about I was there to learn and teach and to learn myself about the teachings, but I don't stay in a box. I'm still reading a lot of psychology, philosophy, neuroscience. As you hear, I just read about everything. And it's not about being in a box. It's like I was there to learn, and I learned, and I taught retreats, sat retreats, a lot of them 3-month silent retreat, stuff like that. I taught people from Yale to jail, locker rooms, boardrooms, doesn't matter. I just go. We get requests. I go out and wherever people live, and I teach them how to be present. Now I had to get skillful about that, not using the Buddhist language and not doing anything, but being able to meet people where they are and then talk to them about being present for life.
So how did you end up hooking up with Phil Jackson?
That's a very interesting story. So being in the Cambridge Center, and when I quit my job, I didn't work for 2 years. So I just meditated and read and done a bunch of different things. And in that time, my mentor, Larry Rosenberg, introduced me to John Kabat-Zinn. And so I went to John, to his clinic, and then I did an internship there. And then
I just explained who those guys are. So
Yeah,
Larry
yeah.
Rosenberg is an eminent Buddhist teacher, studied
Right.
Zen, I believe, for many,
Right.
many years.
Right.
He now runs Cambridge Insight
Right.
Meditation Center. John Kabat-Zinn is a former microbiologist from MIT who really invented what's known as mindfulness-based stress
That's right.
reduction, which is a secularized version
Right.
of Buddhist meditation, which has, in many ways, allowed for this huge explosion of scientific research
Right.
around meditation. John worked at the University of Massachusetts
That's right.
in Worcester, the medical school, and so that's where you must have done
Yeah, and
your-
I worked there for 5 years.
Gotcha.
I worked there as a prison project director where we taught meditation over 5,000 inmates and correction, including the commissioner and everybody else would go through the program.
So you were teaching meditation in some inhospitable environments.
Exactly, and I was in the hell realm, if I'm allowed to say that.
In the hell realm.
Yes.
You're allowed to say that. Yes. That is a Buddhist term.
Yes. So when I met him and I did the internship, we hit it off, and then we actually opened an inner city clinic in Worcester.
This is you and John Kabat-Zinn. Yeah.
Right. And so we wanted to have people from the lower socioeconomic part of our culture to have access to some of these teachings, because the main clinic, if you really look at it, just like if you go to most Buddhist centers, is very homogeneous. It's white, affluent, that type of thing.
Whole food shoppers and NPR listeners.
Yes, exactly. So that was back in the day. So we wanted to make it accessible to people.
Still true.
Yeah, still true. And so we set up a clinic. We don't have to get into it, but we actually provided childcare. It was free, and transportation. We did that, and then I was working on my own, going into a couple of prisons and teaching yoga and meditation. And so when I did the 3-month, this is really interesting. When I did the 3-month course, I was living at the center, so I left, and when I came back from the 3-month course, I went
at IMS.
At CIMC. I did the IMS, right?
So
Insight Meditation Society.
Let me just explain this again, just for people.
Yeah.
So the Insight Meditation Society is related to the CIMC in Cambridge. Insight Meditation Society was founded by my meditation teacher, Joseph Goldstein, and also Sharon Salzberg, who's a mutual friend of ours, and Jack Cornfield, 3 eminent meditation teachers. It's up in the boondocks in Barre, Massachusetts, and every year they do this incredible thing, which is where people go there for 3 months in the middle of this society in which we live, which is so fast-paced. People go there for 3 months, no talking except for every other day to their meditation teacher, and they're meditating all day long every day. So you did that.
I did that, yes. I did a lot of sitting in those 2 years, living at the center and doing a lot of retreats, 10 days or whatever. But anyway, so when I came back from the 3 months retreat, there was a request for proposal, or RFP, where the Department of Corrections, Massachusetts Department of Corrections, wanted somebody to go in and teach meditation and yoga in a couple of the prisons. And so I bid on it, and I won. And so I started doing a couple of programs for them. And then we partnered with John, and then we expanded it to make it bigger. And then that's when I started, that I was already working in the inner city part of it. And then we had the prison project as well. And then that's where I trained teachers, and we went in to, I think we had like 7 different sites, and we had over 5,000 inmates go through it in a 5-year period. But what happened was, I don't have to talk about it, but Governor Weld at the time wanted to get tougher on crime, so he got rid of the program, as well as art programs and running programs, which were all shown to reduce recidivism. But it was a climate here where it was politically motivated to act tough on inmates. And of course, 90% of them get out at some point, so rehabilitation wasn't a priority. So that's how I got involved. So I worked at the Center for Mindfulness in those 2 programs, mostly the prison project, for 5 years.
And then how did Phil Jackson enter the picture?
Yeah, so working at the medical center, John Kabat-Zinn, Saki Santorelli, they do these programs off-site for clinicians. So they were doing a mindfulness-based stress reduction training at Omega Institute, which is in New York. And during that time, Phil used to have a program called Beyond Basketball. And it was a fundraiser for one of his ex-teammates, Eddie Mass, that he would do every summer. So while they were doing it, they were there together, and they started talking. Phil's wife at the time, June, was attending it, and they were showing pictures of the work that the center was doing, and they showed me, and then they talked about me working with inmates and the fact that I roomed with Dr. J in college. So I've been around.
You roomed with Dr. J in college?
I did, yes. He was my roommate in college.
Which college?
UMass Amherst. Okay. So that's how I really got into it. So I used to play basketball, but I got injured, and that was a whole other thing, and that's where some of the pain came from. But I struggled. That's how I got into, because I got the pain medication. Is how I got addicted. Was another way I got addicted, because I was in crutches all the time. I was injury prone. That's a whole other thing. But anyway, so Phil had this, well, he still does. He's really focused on the whole person as a basketball player and helping them, giving them resources so they can live. And they had just won their 3rd NBA championship. This was 1993.
This is the Bulls then?
The Bulls.
Yeah.
And so he invited me to training camp in 1993, October 1993. And Michael Jordan, by that time, his father had gotten murdered, and he had resigned from basketball. So he wasn't playing. So when I got there, they were in full-blown crisis. And so I had to go in and not only teach them, because I was going in to teach them about the stress of success, because when you win 3 championships, you got everybody coming at you. It's a lot of stress. They want you to do these endorsements, and he knew that they needed somebody to teach them how to deal with that, and that's why he had hired me. But then it expanded to more than that when the crisis arose. And so Michael's
father,
when he left, because he was, that was pretty much, they wouldn't kind of known as Michael Jordan and the Jordanaires. They didn't have an identity. So they got better. He came back a year and a half later, and then when he came back the next full season, that was 1996, which is pertinent to what's going on now, because that team won 72 games and lost 10. And of course, that the Golden State Warriors are in pursuit of breaking that record, which is interesting because one of the players on that team, 96 team, is Steve Kerr, who is the coach of the Warriors, and Luke Walton, who is his top assistant, who actually played with Phil and won championships in L.A. So that's how I got involved with Phil, and then that was 22 years ago, and we're still working together and creating things.
And I understand the Golden State Warriors are meditating, right?
Yes. Actually, their 4 core values are joy, mindfulness, compassion, and competition. If you watch them play, you'll see those qualities, those values being expressed.
So I just need to know more about when you walked into the Bulls locker room at that moment of crisis and you started suggesting something like meditation. How did that go down?
Like I said, well, first of all, I approached it 2 ways. One way was I talked about being a spiritual warrior or being a warrior, like a samurai. You're going in that way, but also about the zone. They know what the zone is. They know what being in flow is. So when I talk about that, they're all ears.
And did you actually have them sit and do formal meditation?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they were cool with that?
Yeah.
And what was the practice? Walk me through, on a granular level, what was the practice?
It's the same drill I was doing anybody else. Get them to sit down and become aware of their body and breathing and talk about what we're doing and how it could be helpful in terms of being able to get flow ready or zone ready, whatever you want to call it. But it's really more about, you got a crisis, how are you going to deal with this? You have to be able to create space so you can choose your response and not be reacting or not feel like everything's out of control. You have to collect yourself. And then, so we came up with this concept of one breath, one mind. Phil talks about it in his book, 11 Rings. But that's what it was. It's getting everybody to conspire together, which is breathing together. It's not in a negative sense, but to become one and to work together. So that's what we did. So we'd sit, but I'd have talk about certain concepts. Like, one of the things Phil liked to use is the Jungle Book. The strength of the wolf is in the pack, and the strength of the pack is in the wolf. That's it. So you start talking to them about how the mind-body interacts. You start talking about how you can, slow time down. When you create space between stimulus and response, 3 seconds is an eternity.
How do you actually do that? When you talk about slowing down time, and I know you're being metaphorical here, but when you talk about slowing down time and creating a buffer between stimulus and response, how do you do it?
By the practice, by being able to create and connect with the eye of the hurricane and see that by observing things, what we call bare awareness or bare attention. So you're just noticing things in the bare thing. Because what happens in the perceptual process, when we perceive things, there's a very short period of time where we're just perceiving what's there. It's very short. And then right on to that, there's this idea of there's a perception of what it is. Like say there's a sound. So it could be a fire engine. I say a fire engine goes by. So there's a way that the sound of the fire engine comes in and you're trying to meditate. You're saying, oh, why is that there? It shouldn't be there. And then you make a noise. There's a way that you can just notice that sound is happening. So you can create more space within the perceptual process. So you can see more of what's there before the influx of associative thinking, self-reference, abstract thinking, what it means for the future. Oh, I remember this happened in the past. And then the whole idea of if it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, and what that involves. If it's pleasant, you're going to move towards it. If it's if it's unpleasant, you're going to move away. If it's neutral, you're going to space out. So the idea is to be present so you can see the whole thing. And the analogy I like to use, you growing up in Massachusetts, you understand it. So you go to this one station where I take the bus there, or you take the train, like say the Forest Hills, and then you got to run downstairs to get a bus. And you run downstairs, and in those days, there was nothing on the side of the bus. Where you were going was on the front of the bus. So you run up to the front of the bus, and you look, and you see the letter BR, BR. Then you get on the bus. Then you get to where you're going, and you're saying, oh, I ended up in Bridgewater. I wanted to go to Brockton. So what you want to do in the perceptual process is to go one more letter. So you see the BR, but instead of being in a hurry, you go to BR, there's I or O, a C, if it's O, C, K. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that's what we're doing, and this is what we're doing from moment to moment. Can we see things as they are rather than based on what happened in the past. And we're living to a default future based on what we already know. So it's like when you learn something, there has to be this willingness to just let things speak to you without the interpretation, without the abstract thinking, without the associative thinking, and self-interest or self-reference. That's the biggest one. What does this mean for me? What am I going to get out of this? And can you just see it clearly? So you want to create space. So that's how it can be helpful, that you start to see, okay, when I'm shooting a free throw, my elbow goes out, the ball goes a different thing. If I keep my elbow in, what are the 2 or 3 things I need to do? And it's like, okay, I missed that shot, so next time use your legs. So it's more a monitoring aspect without self-reference. Without, I got to make this shot, other than, no, just shoot. So you get it in front of people. It's how MJ can be at the free throw line, shooting a free throw with 15,000 flashes going off at the instant he's letting the ball go.
Walk me through again. How can he do that? Because I've always wondered.
Because he is in the moment. He's just in his body. He doesn't see that. He can let it be there without making it a distraction.
But if he was truly in the moment, he would notice all the flashes.
No.
too.
Being in the moment and being mindful in the moment, might not be. If when you're in the moment and you just know it, you're just in your body and you're just shooting, just like you're at practice. There's nobody there. You've trained your nervous system to do it. So now your conscious thinking needs to be quiet and let your body do what it does. It doesn't matter.
He's in the moment and he's focused.
Yeah,
so he's
yeah.
not wide open panoramic.
No. It's more on what he's doing. Everybody else doesn't exist. Nothing exists but this moment and what you're doing.
So the actual practice you're teaching in the locker room, is it just the basic mindfulness practice of notice the feeling of your breath coming in and going out, and every time you get lost, start again? Is that the basic teaching?
Yeah, that's basic. But here's the interesting thing. So you become mindful, then what? You got to be mindful. Then that mindfulness has to be aware. So you got to be mindful what your intention is, what you're doing, whether it's working or not. And mindful what works, what doesn't work. That's what it's really about. Being mindful or developing that ability to be contemplative, or to really, and to contemplate is to look closely or to look repeatedly at something. So you're looking at it with fresh eyes. You're letting it speak to you. And then with the mindfulness and then the clearly knowing or the understanding develops. It's like the analogy I'll use is doing a jigsaw puzzle. So you're putting pieces together and then some of them don't work and you put them back. Then you come to a piece and you say, oh, I remember that. That's here. And then you put it there. Then you keep doing it with the mindfulness and the understanding or just knowing or getting data or getting information. And then you get enough of it. Then you see the full picture. Then you put that aside. You get something else. So it's all about wisdom. It's all about understanding how things work.
But meditation in and of itself is not going to make you faster or jump higher or have a better golf swing, right?
No, but when you come from that quiet place, you know what you need to do to get it based on who you are. So quickness isn't the issue. Maybe the issue is being where the ball is going to be rather than having to react to it. But actually, because you see people when they play the outfield or whatever, if they're just fully in their body and just fully present, their body knows where to go. So it's like in the book, The Inner Game of Tennis, he talks about self one and self two. Self one is the conscious self, that's the words of the song. Self two is the melody. Self one is dominating everything, and you got to be still and know or quiet it down so that your natural intuition, your natural knowing is able to.
But how do you quiet it down? Because I hear this all the time from people. People say to me, Dan, I get it. You're out there evangelizing for meditation. The science suggests it's good, but you don't understand. In fact, I had a guest on recently, Amy Cuddy, who's a social psychologist at Harvard Business School, who is obviously an incredibly smart woman who doesn't meditate. Why? Because she says, I can't turn my mind off.
Yeah, but see, but that's the crux of the problem. You're not trying to turn your mind off. You're trying to create space and let your mind be. It's like in Zen mind, beginner's mind, the best way to control cows is to give them more space. So when you're trying to do something, meditation is not trying to go anywhere or do anything. Meditation or being present is just seeing what's there and letting it speak to you.
So the feeling of your breath, the noises going through the room.
Yeah, it could be anything. Just sitting there and just letting it know. But if you're saying, okay, she's got the wrong idea. The idea of meditation is to stop thinking or to slow your mind down. That's not what the thing is. The goal is to be present to what is. So if you got all these thoughts that are negative or negative self-talk, can you create space where you can observe it, let it speak to you without being identified with it?
But now I got to ask you a question, because it's a selfish question, because I've been meditating for nearly 7 years, which
Right.
isn't a long time, but it's, not nothing.
Right.
And I'm getting better at doing what you're describing when I'm actually meditating. In other words, when I'm actually meditating, I do a reasonably good job of letting whatever comes up, my
That's
thinking,
right.
my sensations,
Right.
whatever the noises, just letting it be there without
Right.
reacting to it. However, I am not a clutch player. And when I'm under pressure a lot because I'm on live
That's right.
television or
That's
I get
right.
up and speak
That's
to
right.
people, the voice in my head ramps up. Did you comb your hair? Are you prepared for this? You're going to sound like an idiot. Whatever it is, it's all yap.
That's right. But you control that.
I don't feel like I control it.
Yeah, because you let it do what it does.
Well,
And it's based on your belief system. It's based on how you're seeing things or how you're expecting things. It's just playing out the scenario based on your beliefs.
so what do I do about that?
Change your beliefs.
So just tell my Stuart Smalley, look in the mirror and tell myself I'm
so
awesome?
just
or-
like you tell yourself you're not going to do a good job, you can tell yourself it's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. And remember when you did it the last time and you worried about it, I say don't worry till you have to. We worry before, and we don't just worry. We play out the scenarios of what the what the consequences of the bad, of the way things are going to go. We play that out.
Yeah, but I believe that my internal anguish is what allows me to be successful.
Well, good luck with that one. Because it's a razor's edge. Because what it does, it gives you energy. But you can get energy from love and joy and compassion.
How do you talk about love and joy and compassion in a locker room full of
Don't be hating.
don't be hating?
Don't be hating.
That's just
You got to talk to who you're talking to. They
Yeah.
understand that. Don't be hating.
And does it work?
Yeah, it
Because
works.
these guys, they have to do some, I don't know if hating is the right word, but they're certainly going to feel not necessarily love and compassion and joy for their opponents.
But see, here's the key. They're not competing against them. They're competing against themselves. So when you're focused on being better than you were, or being better today than you were yesterday, the enemy is within. It's not out there. Because if you're feeling good about yourself and you know you're doing the best you can, what's happening out there has nothing to do with you. It's not your business how Dan feels. I might be concerned about it, but I can't control that. What I can control is me and allowing Dan to be any way he needs to be, because he's making a choice on some level, even if it's unconscious, even if it's involuntary. So this is what it's about. It's about starting to see how we're thinking, and that inner voice, that's really important. Can we, the inner talk, can we change it so it's consistent with our goal? Or this is going to be great. This is going to be, and even if I make a mistake, it's like if you're playing a guitar and you hit the wrong note. If you keep playing, no one will notice.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, okay, you mentally note, okay, that was wrong note. Then you go out and you practice so that you get that part, because it's saying to you, you need to practice that. You need to get that more, you just need more skill development in that area. So if we approach it that way, it's not a problem. I tell you, I tape all my talks and everything. At first, I hated the sound of my voice, and I'd have all of these self-talk. And then at some point, because I was doing this stuff and I stopped paying attention, I realized, man, that's pretty good. Where'd that come from? But I have that space, just observing it as an observer, not as my voice. Oh, that's me. But can I just listen to it like I would listen to anybody else, and not judge? And then that's what mindfulness is. It's not judging. It's just noticing what's going on and learning from it, letting it speak to you. So we're interpreting things all the time. We're not really hearing what's there. We're interpreting it based on what we already know. And so part of this is to have the vulnerability to not know and to just see what is.
So these legends that you taught, guys like Shaq and Kobe and Michael Jordan, are they still meditating?
Some of them I don't know. I know Kobe is. I don't know about the others because I didn't ask him, but Kobe volunteered that. I don't really get into that. But mindfulness is not just, see, Dr. Dre has a definition for for meditation. I have my mind on money, money on my mind. So whatever is on your mind is what your meditation is. That's what it is, what we call right thinking. So if you have thoughts of compassion, thoughts of seeking wisdom, thoughts of love, thoughts of curiosity, well, then that so your attention follows intention. You don't have to believe me, just check it out. Sometimes we're looking at things and we don't know what our intention is, but if we say, okay, I'm looking at this, therefore my intention is X. Oh, if I change my intention, then what I'm observing is going to change. So William James talked about this hundreds of years ago, about the self-will, or this idea of free will is choosing what we're going to hold in mind. Because there's things going through, but we can choose to hold something in mind longer than it would ordinarily stay by the act of will. And it's a practice. That's why we call it a practice. So we want to go from the cushion, off the cushion. So you can always be in your body. If you're walking, if you're standing or you're sitting, you can feel what your body feels like. You can breathe a little bit and just pay attention to what you're doing. If I reach for the water, just feeling that, not thinking about it. But if I just think water, the hand goes. If I think about my right palm, where's your attention go? Left palm, left foot, bottom. So, but we don't train that. We don't recognize that we have that power to choose, and there's certain themes that are conducive to wholesomeness, like loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy. Like, okay, so the opposing team wins, so you hate them and all that. That's jealousy. But what if you say, okay, they earned that, good for them. Now, or you're not a true fan. No, you're a human being. That's what it is. Because what if your son was on that team? Would you want people to hate him because he's on an opposing team, or would you want them to appreciate that he earned that victory, or he earned what he got? That we all are heir to what we get. So our intentions, we're creating things, but we don't have that understanding that we create the world. The world out here is just a reflection of our inner life. So if you're playing the inner game, then what you express is going to be, it can be in line with that. So if you want to be compassionate and you're talking to somebody in the inner dialogue and say, what a jerk, or, I don't like him or her. You got to change that and say, okay, that's judgmental. They're a human being just like me. That we're connected, even though I have this illusion of separateness, we're the same. We're human beings, and we all want to be happy. We all want to be successful. We all want to experience grace and ease. But because of ignorance, we don't know how to do it. And then when we don't do it, we want to play the blame game. Some person plays a thing, when in actuality, we're making choices. That if we can understand the choices we're making, then we can change it. And I'll give you this little formula that Gandhi expressed. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny. So you can go in and change any of those things. So, and we don't even know we have belief systems, so sometimes we got to work backwards. Based on what I'm thinking, this must be the paradigm from which I'm operating from. And so what we want to do is, and then we have paradigm blindness, because we have a paradigm and we don't even know it's there. It's like glasses. We get on the heat glasses and we don't even know we have on glasses. Mm-hmm. But we can take them off, put on the love glasses. So this is what it's all about, transforming the mind, making the mind our friend, but also making the mind based on this idea that we're all connected and that, we all want peace. And so can we have the mind see clearly when we're causing suffering for ourselves, when we're causing suffering for others. So by knowing that, then we can reverse it and say, okay, I want to create happiness. So then I create happiness for others. And Sean Accor's book, The Happiness Advantage, in his work, 90% of long-term happiness is predicated on how the brain interprets our experience. 90%. So if you interpret it based on goodness, based on wisdom, the opposite of greed is generosity, or love, hatred or ill will, loving kindness, goodwill, confusion, clarity, wisdom. If we're cultivating, or if we have those qualities of mind, if we have those attitudes, then what we see, what we do, what we feel is going to be very different.
You had a lot of luck teaching the Lakers and the Bulls to put the love glasses on, and they did really well. You're now working with the Knicks. You came in, Phil Jackson took over the Knicks as GM at a time when the Knicks, they weren't performing that well, and so you're working in a tough situation. How is that going?
It's going the way it's going. My job is the same, whether they're winning or not. Help them be present and make wise choices. And so there's a lot of teams I work with that aren't as successful as the ones you know about. But the idea is it takes as long as it takes to transform or to create a foundation and a structure. So here's what I said last year, and I think it's the same this year. My experience of going to the Knicks is that, we go in and, it's like buying a house. You go in and there's a crack in the ceiling or a crack in the wall, and you're repairing the cracks and you keep getting them, and then you realize, okay, so let's go see what's in the basement. You go in the basement and you realize the foundation is off. So you're working on the foundation, and people go by and say, well, there's still a crack there. There's still this there. Well, that's because the foundation is still being settled. Unless you fix the foundation, you're just addressing symptoms and not the cause. And so sometimes when you have to redo the foundation, it takes longer. It takes as long as it takes. And so you have to have the right effort, which is a continuous application of poised energy. It's like, so we're working at it, and we're continuing to move forward. And sometimes it doesn't feel like anything's being done, but it's being done. It's just that it has its own rhythm and pace. And so the question is, are the fans in New York going to be willing to have patience and trust that it's going to get there, but it's going to take time? And so when people say, oh, you must be having a difficult time, whatever, I said, no, it's all good. If it's, if they're winning or not, it's the same joke. Can you be present and can you create space so that you're making more informed decisions? And you're living in a way according to how things are. And that's where, the truth shall set you free, or, so you get that. But being present in the moment, whether it's painful or unpainful, or helpful, if it's painful or painless, it's still the same drill. Be present for it and learn from it, and then understand that that's ultimately what we're here to do, is how can we alleviate suffering? How can we use what's here? Because reality is not everybody's going to win a championship. It's not going to happen. But if you can walk off the court and say you gave everything you gave and you were fully present, you did the best you can, that's a winner.
Not in the eyes of the fans who...
Well, that's fine, but at the same time, when you see a team playing hard and giving all they got, because I had this experience with a BC basketball team, we lose by 40, but you can't be mad at them because they gave you everything they had.
Yeah. And so what you're asking of your team now, the Knicks, is just to give everything you have in a present-minded way.
Yeah, I had this, and of course, you being from Massachusetts, you'll get this. I was giving a talk at the Cambridge Center. This was probably 2000, and there was a fan there that said, how am I going to deal with being a Red Sox fan? We haven't won a World Series in umpteen million years and this and that. I said, why don't you just focus on being a good fan? Just focus on, what it means to be a fan, and to support your team and accept them. Because this is what we do. We have conditional love. We love you only if you do what I want, instead of saying, no, love is unconditional. Just be a fan, just enjoy the game, and just support them and hope that they get better. Well, a year later or two, they won a championship. He probably thinks I'm a genius. But I didn't know that. I just know that being present and being in the moment, everything's going to turn out okay. You're going to be okay, or you'll have peace with what turns out. But we have this idea that it's conditional. If I do this, only if that happens, instead of saying, no, I don't know what's going to happen. Let's just be present and do the best I can. Do what I know to do today, manage this moment, and then that will affect the next moment. Manage this day, it'll affect the next day. And so a lot of people want to hear a formula, but it's really that simple. It's just letting things speak to you, learn from them, and keep learning, keep getting, you keep putting that puzzles together.
I want to go back to something we were discussing before, and I was talking about how remarkable it is that you ended up in the mindfulness world, given everything that had come before for you. I mean, it's not so surprising that I ended up in mindfulness. I mean, I was born on third base. My parents listened to NPR. They're doctors.
Right.
So when they sent me to yoga class when I was 5. So
Right.
no big deal that I ended up in meditation. But we are in this situation where, in my analysis at least, the mindfulness and meditation world, despite some very well-intentioned effort by high-ranking people in the field, is mostly white and mostly upper middle class. How do we change that?
That's something that people ask me all the time, and that's one of my goals, is just to make it available to everybody, not just in the inner city, but in the rural areas, in the Indian reservations, all the other countries on this planet. It's just doing what we need to do and just educating, putting the word out. There's a way of being. And I think sports is a way of enhancing it, because people love sports. And I think it's one of the things where we have to sit and talk about how we're going to do that, how we're going to have an impact on more people. I mean, one of the things I'm doing is working with this company to develop an app for 14 to 18-year-old basketball players. And then, writing a book about mindful athletes for teens, some of the ways I'm thinking about doing it. But we gotta, it's like the gospel is spreading the good news. We have to give people a vision, a possibility that, you can be a little bit more awake, just being mindful, and let's see what happens. Let's just trust, being present, and that if we can let everybody release the divine spark or the masterpiece within them, I think that's the biggest thing, is to get people to recognize that they have that, and that we need to develop that, and we need to not just who's in the meditation halls, but there's a lot of people who are live and who are present that don't meditate, because their nature, they're so focused on what they're doing. That's what we need to be expand what it means to mindfulness. What
You said
it means,
Michael Jordan's like that.
Yeah, what it means to be fully present. When you see people doing what they're really good at, they're usually really focused and concentrated, but they don't know how to take that love for that, and I talk about it sometimes, take the love of the game to what you're doing, because the love of the game isn't the game, it's coming from you. So if you access that love, you can take that to wherever you go. So it's more about to ask the question. I don't have an answer, but to ask the question is kind of to know the answer, because now you start thinking about, okay, we need to do that. Let's think about it. Let's reflect on it. And then the answer will come. And some people will do it in their own way. And at some point, hopefully it'll generate a critical mass. That's why mindfulness is exploding now. So it's happening. It's not as fast as we would like, but we can accelerate it by embodying, by modeling what an awake person, or what it means to be awake, in the sense, not fully awake where you're awakened to nirvana or whatever, but just being a little bit more awake. Like you talk about your book, 10% happier. That's significant.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good value.
Yeah. Even 2%, it makes a big difference.
For sure.
So it's like that old Hokie Carmichael song, slow motion gets you there quicker or faster. That's what it is. If we just have to do the day-to-day, planting the seeds like Johnny Appleseed, you throw them around and they're going to take root where there's sunlight and soil is good and there's, moisture. And we just got to trust that that's enough for now. And then if we can focus on certain things, like I think we need to get our youth before ISIS gets them.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to have them understand that they have tremendous resources, and how do we get them so they can say no to that, because they see that that's against their values. We have to talk more about values. We have to talk more about what it means to be a human being, and people who are unaffected or marginalized because they look at their different skin color or they have a different religion. We have to start realizing what the consequences of that discrimination, how it affects people, and people are isolated and they're feeling separate. We got to create more of a holistic, or more of a communal feel to what we're doing.
We're almost done, but I want to, before we close, I want to get a sense of what is your daily practice? When do you do it? What are you doing? How are you sitting?
Yes, that's a very good question. 24/7. It's my daily practice. So when I wake up in the morning, I'm in my body, I'm feeling my body, I'm breathing, I'm recognizing, okay, what's my energy level like? Oh, I could sleep a little bit more, or I'm just jumping up because I'm excited to do something. And then just really understanding what lens am I observing my experience with. From moment to moment, I can be aware of how I'm seeing things, what I'm thinking about. So it's this journey of just checking in, what I'm feeling, what is my self-talk, how am I seeing things. So it's really about being able to sit and to read literature, or to remind myself about, what this practice is about, what mindfulness is. So I study a lot. I read books, but mostly it's just reflecting on, what if I become a channel of love? What if I can just meditate on love and let love flow through me? And when the thought of Dan or someone comes to me, I can send them love. Or if it's somebody who is challenging, I can send them forgiveness, or may they be happy. So there's a lot of things we can do, but it's really from day to day, moment to moment, reminding myself that whatever posture I'm in, I can feel my body and I can feel my breath.
Do you have a formal practice that you do?
Yeah, I do formal and informal, but I don't separate them.
How long is your formal practice every
Depending
day?
on how much time I have, I might be able to sit for half an hour. If I'm lucky, 45 minutes, but sometimes 10 minutes here, then 10 minutes there. So it's, sometimes it's doing my Qigong or my Tai Chi, or sometimes it's just doing my stretching. Sometimes it's doing my walk. And a lot of times it's just, maybe writing my journal and just reading about the practice, rereading things that talk about being present, or talks about how this mind-body process works. So reading about like the neuroscience, understanding how we can retrain the brain, how we create and do neural nets. But my practice is, so formally, it's not a lot of time. If I could squeeze in an hour a day, that would be great in terms of sitting, but in terms of moving and just being, like being able to change my mind from like anger or frustration to, what we call right mindfulness, is just altering the mind, is really more about me getting clear about my attitudes, what's my perspective, how am I seeing things, and why am I seeing things a different way. So sometimes it's not just being in silence, it's trying to get some information about how I'm seeing things, or why I'm seeing things a certain way, or the fact that my mind is distracted. That's all part of the practice. It's distracted. It keeps thinking about this one theme. What's up with that? And then maybe to turn towards that. And why am I so upset or so concerned about this issue? And then go deeper and think about, well, what is this about? And so there's a lot of ways of doing it, but it's really as simple as just really, if I just measure, how much faith do I have? When I was writing my book, it's like I never had faith.
Faith in what?
Exactly. Why do they want my book? There's all these books out there. I can't write a book. Who am I? The authorizing,
Yes.
the judge, the critic. And then I said, okay, well, what Einstein said, he said, is this a friendly universe or unfriendly? I said, oh, it's friendly. And, well, okay, so what are the laws? The laws are, if I focus on what I want and what I want to create, how I want to serve, I can't hold that thought in mind and the same thought that, I can't do this, it's too hard, it hurts, it's unpleasant. So I focus on what I can control, what I can do, and that is my attitude and my effort. I can always control those.
Are you trying in your practice to become enlightened, and what do you think that even means?
It's interesting. It's kind of like, here's how I see it. That's my ultimate goal, but it's like everything else. When you set a goal, like to be enlightened or to do a marathon or whatever, you set the goal, but then you focus on the journey.
So it's like you can be zone ready, you can be enlightenment ready.
That's what I'm talking about. So, yes. So, yeah, that's the ultimate is I want to be fearless.
What do you think about what do you think enlightenment means?
Enlightenment, or I like the word awakening, means that I'm fully awake and I can see things and I can experience things without the greed, the hatred, the delusion, that I could just see things as they are and have that equanimity and compassion and love. So it's like being fully present with just being okay with things as they are. not needing them to change, even seeing suffering and realizing, I can have compassion for the person suffering, but also knowing that life is suffering.
And to you, is this just an ideal, or have you ever actually met anybody who meets these criteria?
I've seen some people. I've read about people who are obviously more advanced. I met the Dalai Lama, obviously, and some other folks, and they have an energy, they have a spirit, and I read about them. I have photographs of mendicants or monks that are in deep concentration, and I study. I read about the Buddha and stuff like that, and I reflect on the qualities. So it's more about identifying with their qualities than the person themselves, but because they are like us, we have Buddha nature. We're wired for enlightenment. So whether it happens or not, it's another thing. But the more I try to be enlightened, the less I'll be enlightened. I learned that just like writing a book. Once I stopped trying to write a book, it wrote itself. So there's something about forming the intention and then allowing it to happen.
The Dalai Lama was our first guest on this podcast, and he told me he thought my meditation practice was still in its very early stages. So I got that going for me.
Okay, yeah, well, that's, yeah. Well, he has a formula in his tradition, what it means. But ultimately, I think, there's a book, it's called Chop Wood and Carry Water. Before enlightenment, we chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, we chop wood and carry water. Mm-hmm. But you're not identified with this sense of self or, experiencing fear and that sort of thing. So I have moments where there's fearlessness, but I'd say I'm just trying to deal with the moment and the teachings about the factors of enlightenment. I try to study that and do that stuff, but I don't really see it like I have to do that or, my life is going to be ruined. It's more like, I'm on the path. I'm learning how to be more mindful, how to gather more intelligence or more wisdom as I go along. And right now is, that's enough. When I go on retreat and I reflect on things, I think about enlightenment and stuff like that. But it's a goal, but it's not something I'm focused on. Because if I'm focused on that, I'm not here. Like I tell people all the time, if you're focused on how you're doing, you're not focused on what you're doing. And to me, what you're doing, but it's okay to have it out there. Just like I feel like I may be different because I feel like I have to measure my practice. I have to monitor it. Am I getting better or am I not? So the 5 spiritual powers are one way to measure your practice. Do I have more trust? Do I have more wisdom? Am I making the right effort with a poise, with a centeredness? Am I being more mindful? How can I develop more mindfulness? Because the secret is the continuity from moment to moment. And I'm not able to do that 24/7, but that's the intention. And if I'm mindful for 24/7, I'll be enlightened.
George Mumford, pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. The book is called The Mindful Athlete. After having followed your work for so many years, it's just very gratifying to finally meet you. So thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Same with you, to meet you after, we've been trying for a while. So this is awesome.
I want to thank everybody for watching and for listening. And for the podcast listeners, I just want to remind you, we love it if you subscribe and rate us and review us. As I sometimes say, we prefer 5 stars to 1, but, your call. And we'll be back soon with another great guest and more guided meditations, which we'll be posting, I think, weekly from here on in. Take it easy. See you next time.